In money matters, the JSE is trading slightly down, hovering at one-year lows as investors eagerly await the midterm budget policy statement and the U.S. Federal Reserve's monetary policy decision later in the day. Greg Katzenellenbogen is the director at Sanlam Private Wealth, and he joins us now to take a look at the latest market moves. Greg, thank you very much for your time. Let's see how the rand is faring, especially ahead of South Africa's midterm budget policy statement that will be delivered today.
Well, the rand is really treading water, not doing much, slightly down on yesterday, around 1872. But that's because the dollar is stronger this morning, so it's not only the rand, most of the emerging market currencies slightly weaker, but not much volatility today. But after the minister has delivered his budget, I would think that the rand could take some direction from that.
Sure. Given that there's not much room for the minister to move, expectations, I guess, ahead of that delivery of the midterm budget policy statement, what should he focus on?
Well, there's a lot he should focus on, but I don't know if he's going to appear with a magician's hat, because that's really what he needs, and a wand. But in the absence of that, he has a very difficult task ahead of him. I think the thing he needs to focus on is really cutting the costs, of running the government. Now, it's all very well to say, where will you cut costs? But I would imagine that there's many government departments where there's a lot of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and I think that should be a first target from that. I don't think he has any room to raise taxes, and the talk about raising value-added tax, that's only going to hurt the poor. Talk about he won't be able to do anything about the social relief grants, because there's so many people that are living below the poverty line that the government has no option but to help those people. So he has to look at the departments where there's a lot of wasteful expenditure. And I think they need to have a serious focus at each and every department that receives budget funds from them, how they can cut costs. But, the job has been made more difficult for them by the fact that commodity prices have been under pressure, and that hasn't helped, and the rand has been weak. But I think also, and then when it comes to public servants' wage increases, they have to stick to the inflation target, because although they have the best will in the world, under pressure from a lot of the unions, they've been forced to ignore that and give above inflation increases. And people in the private sector are not receiving above inflation increases, or only slightly above. So I think it's something the government needs to toughen up on and say that, look, we just can't afford it now. And it's very difficult, because the other thing he needs to focus on is making sure all his colleagues in the cabinet are on the same page. Because after in the last couple of months when he has been talking about things are tough in the country, he's been, some of his colleagues have, derided him, and everyone will need to be on the same page. But, that's why I say he needs a magician's hat or wand, because unfortunately, maybe 9 months or so from an election, and to bring an austerity budget in an election year is going to be very, very difficult. But if he doesn't do something, as he said, we could run out of money, and he will, we can say to him, look, exercise restraint when you're borrowing money. But unfortunately, you'll have to borrow. But the cost of that money is becoming more and more expensive. Currently on government bonds maturing in the year 2048, they're paying close to 13%. But if they're going to issue more and more money, people will want a higher return. So the minister, I don't envy him. He has a very tough task ahead, but it will be interesting to see how if he can manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Magicians make it look so easy. Hey, Greg, especially with the warning that we could run out of money by 2024 if we continue borrowing. It's a scary prospect. Let's take a look at the World Bank's latest food security update. Food price inflation exceeded overall inflation, 77% from 170 countries where figures are available. What does that mean?
Well, it just means that it's not only in South Africa where the price of food has gone up. It's a worldwide problem, and it's gone as inflation has risen across the globe. it's taken food prices with it. But that has been exacerbated by things like the war in Ukraine, where you've struggled to get grain out, and also in terms of the energy crisis. So, yeah, the whole world is suffering with food increases. Hopefully the good news is that it looks like inflation is probably starting to peak around the globe, that food prices will come down. But it's currently a worldwide problem, and everyone in most countries are suffering from the same cost of living increase.
Mm-hmm. Octodec Investments reported a decline in its distributable income. Talk us through the performance and what led to the declines.
Well, the performance wasn't too bad. You know, they increased their revenue, but their distributable income went down, and that was mainly due to administration and corporate costs. And it just shows how difficult it is in South Africa for companies, whether right across the spectrum, to keep costs under control, especially with higher inflation, that rent. But generally, if you look at from their residential division, which makes up over 30% of their income, that did exceptionally well. I think that it increased by about 10%. So they got a lot of new tenants. Their residential buildings are mainly full, and they got decent rental increases. It was offset somewhat. There were a couple of government contracts where the government had to negotiate much lower rentals, but the rest of their government contracts, they got about a 6% increase in the rental income. So all in all, not a bad set of results.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Greg Katzenellenbogen is with Sanlam.